My very special guest is an accomplished consultant, author, and international speaker with over 2 decades of experience helping leaders improve business performance. She's the author of The Secret to Peak Productivity, which introduced her proprietary peak productivity pyramid framework. She has worked with esteemed clients such as Microsoft, KPMG, MassMutual, and Google. She's also the author of her forthcoming book, Meaningful Work: How to Ignite Passion and Performance in Every Employee. She is Tamara Miles. Welcome to the show, Tamara.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
I know we had a quick conversation a little bit before. It's been back a couple weeks, but I remember being so impressed with the work that you had done previously. I couldn't wait to have you on my show, and here you are.
I'm excited to have this conversation.
Well, one of the things I will start us off with is that I hear these words like purpose and meaning and significance, and a lot of people, myself, for example, often use them interchangeably. And I know we're going to be talking a little bit about meaning. So I wonder if you might describe and define for us what's your definition of meaning?
Yeah, that's such a great point because we do see, like in popular press and even in speaking, that those words are used interchangeably, but they are different. And so purpose is a part of meaning, but they're not the same thing. And so, meaning, when we feel like our life has meaning, we feel like our life makes sense and that it matters. And so there are three components of meaning in life, and this is based on academic literature and psychology. And those three components are coherence, significance, and purpose. So purpose is one of three components of meaning. And so coherence is the cognitive component, is our thinking about meaning in life. And that is, does our life and do our experiences make sense? And so it's that moment when you're reading a book and it all clicks and it all makes sense and you get the story. Like, that's coherence. It's feeling like our life makes sense. Significance is feeling like our life matters, that it's worth living. And then purpose is having direction or an aim. It's the motivational aspect of meaning. Like, we have goals that we're working towards.
I can understand where if you were thinking that your life and the occurrences, they all seem random. There's no control you have. Why do bad things happen to good people kind of
Right.
situation? That would really challenge your sense that you're living a meaningful life or doing meaningful work.
Right, because, like, why would it matter if nothing makes sense, if things don't add up, if things aren't leading to something, right? It's really easy to feel discouraged. And so people who have a high sense of meaning in life and feel their life is meaningful can kind of connect the dots of their experience.
And mostly we're talking about in a work context, and I could see where that can be challenging too. Organizations can get pretty complex pretty quickly. And so when you think about having this sense of coherence, as you pointed out, sometimes it gets challenged when all of a sudden maybe some other department makes a decision, it affects us. We're like, that didn't really make sense. And all of a sudden it's like, well, why do I even bother? Yeah, some people can be forgiven, I would say, for having that type of response or attitude to certain things that happen to us at work. Have you seen that as well? Does that challenge or relate to meaning as we experience it in the workplace?
Yes. And so my area of focus and research is actually meaningful work. So, how does meaning show up at work? And so, what I just described in those three dimensions is meaning in life, although there's obviously a lot of overlap.
Mhm.
So, what we find is that when we experience our work as meaningful, we feel a much higher sense of meaning in life, right? Because we feel like what we're doing with our time matters and it makes sense and all of that. But the dimensions of meaningful work that emerged in my research is what we call the three C's. We created this framework called the three C's of meaning at work. And that's community, contribution, and challenge. And so community is about, when I go to work, do I feel connected to the people I work with? We spend more time at work than we do with our family and our friends combined. And so do we have work friends? Do we have people that know us? Do we feel like we belong? And so that's the community. Contribution is the significance aspect is, do I feel like what I'm doing matters? Do I feel like, the time I spend every day working on all these tasks, do they add up to something? Do I have a sense of purpose and impact? And then challenge is all about our own personal growth and development. Like, am I reaching my potential? Am I learning at work? Am I growing? And am I getting better every day?
It's amazing when you think about that. I've seen informal everything from informal studies to formal studies when it comes to So do you have a best friend at work? That's something I
Yeah.
saw crop up in the literature relatively recently. And they talk a lot about work besties and these kinds of things. But you can see where you want to have people that you enjoy working with. You want to have a good positive relationship with your manager, your supervisor, boss, whatever term you use, with the company culture, and trying to
Yes.
incorporate that into your identity. Like all these are forms of that first C, that community aspect you described that's just so important.
It's so important when Gallup asks people, "Do you have a best friend at work?" And those who answer no, they're 176% more likely to be looking for a new job, right?
Mm,
People say that work friendship is the most important aspect to a happy work life. And so it makes sense. It makes sense. Like we want to be connected. We're wired to belong, right? There's such a loneliness crisis at work right now. And the places where we used to go to find community, like maybe religious organizations or local community places, like we're not spending time in those places anymore.
right.
And so work is kind of filling that gap for us. We're looking to go to work and feel connection and belonging there. And, Matt, our brains respond to loneliness in the same way as it responds to thirst and hunger. So the same alarms activate in our brains when we don't feel a sense of belonging as when we are hungry and thirsty. So we are wired to connect.
Yeah, it kind of relates to my next question for you, which is you mentioned, for example, we're starting to feel a little bit of isolation, loneliness. I've seen the research on remote workers, hybrid workers in particular, feeling that they're missing some of that input and some of that connection that you talked about. I wonder if there's anything else you're seeing in the nature of modern work that's putting meaning really at the center, at the forefront of something that workers are seeking, maybe even expecting. How are you seeing this more modern experience of work and how it relates to meaning?
Yeah, the call for meaning, our kind of yearning for meaning has always been there, right? It's central to our experience as humans. And I would say in the past 5 years, that call has gotten louder and louder. And I think it's a confluence of things. I think the hybrid and remote work for sure, like has caused us to, first of all, with the sudden change, we started questioning why we work. Does what I do even matter, right? So all those meaning questions, but also then the disconnection of, I don't feel like I have those work friends. I'm not connecting with anybody at a deeper level. I mean, one of the things that research showed was that our connections at work became more, only became strong with the people we interact with in our team, but we lost all the weak ties that we used to have across the organization. And that's really important for meaning. What we found in our study is that the leaders who really are intentional about creating meaning at work, they make sure that their people are connecting and building relationships across the organization.
Hmm.
And so I think the hybrid and remote work model for sure kind of increase that urgency for meaning. And I think things like generative AI, automation, people are like, how am I going to fit into this equation of work? And is what do the skills I have matter anymore? How am I going to learn and grow? And so people are asking those existential questions, right? And then I think the fact that Gen Z really entered the workforce in the past couple years, and they are pretty vocal about wanting meaningful work. They're pretty vocal about not wanting to compromise their well-being and work-life balance. And so the conversation has shifted. And one thing that's really fascinating is that the research shows really clearly that all generations care about meaningful work, and all generations define it pretty similarly. So we hear sometimes, oh, Gen Z, they don't want to work, they don't, but it's not. Like we all want work to feel meaningful. We all want to feel like the third of our lives that we spend at work matter.
It's so true. And I think when you look back and some of these different dimensions, I remember studying organizational network analysis and trying to see like how people are bumping into each other and getting their answers to their questions. it's so true, and I hadn't really thought about it until you were describing how those weaker ties, those fringes that used to bump into somebody when you were both getting coffee at the same time, and you'd learn about what's going on in a different department. Just doesn't happen in remote formats the same way. You have to be much more deliberate about creating those secondary connections as opposed to the primary of who you do most of your day-to-day work with. And I'm certain it's weakening organizations as a result in that sense.
Yeah.
But the alternative about let's just force everybody to come back to work, it also has its own consequences. So I think we're just in a very interesting time about how we help people feel the level of engagement and attraction and commitment, but avoid the isolation, the loneliness, the weak ties. It's a fascinating situation and time that we're in this world of work hours.
Yeah, it is. And I think we struggle because there's no roadmap, right, to learn from, and because there's no one size fits all. What I'm seeing now for trends is that this is going to become more localized at the manager level. These decisions about, focus time and time together is going to become more localized. And I don't know if this is true, but this is the trend. And, the companies that are forcing the return to office are going to lose talent. We can't just I heard a metaphor that I loved. It's like you can't unscramble the eggs, right? Like if in the past 5 years you were hiring people that were distributed and you said, this can be a remote or a hybrid, and now you want to change. Well, those people signed up for something they might not want to be going. So you might lose a lot of talent. We might see a lot of turnover. One company in our research that is navigating this really well is Reddit. So we interviewed this woman there named Michelle Lawsey, and she is the senior director of employee experience, but her informal title is concierge of connection.
Uh-huh.
And so her responsibility is to ensure, and they are fully distributed. They have a few locations, but nobody's required to come in. But what they're doing is they're making people want to come in and want to come in for specific things, not to come in and sit in front of a Zoom screen all day having remote meetings, but to come in and have time together. And so they've devised many different projects. One of them is called Project Atelier, and that's a budget that people apply for, a grant, and they can do activities and create shared experiences with their coworkers, whether in the office or outside. Some people did a lipstick making class and some people did a kayaking experience, but it's all funded by work. But then for the people who want to come in, she helps, that manager, that leader who's bringing a team in, they reach out to Michelle and her team, and then she helps them design the experience in a way that's going to prioritize connection.
And that's such a huge part of things I think that we can do to be intentional about these components. So when you mentioned connection being one of them, and I feel like it leads me to this question about thinking about CHROs, CEOs, the senior most people in the organization who are like, okay, we are bought in. Tomorrow we're bought in. We want to have meaning. But the question becomes, what do we do about it? I mean, what happens and how can we incorporate meaning into our culture better? And you gave an example here about the connection aspects at Reddit, but are there other examples you can share about if I'm a senior person or I'm on the senior people side and I say, we could be doing a little better, turn up the volume on meaning around here. What are some things that I might consider?
Yeah, that's, it's so important to have practical and simple tools, right? Because it's like to do organizational transformation and do all that. That's hard. It takes forever. People give up. And so I want to share two things. The first thing is that, our study found that half or almost half, 48% of any individual's experience of meaning at work is directly related to what their leader does and doesn't do. So for those leaders you mentioned, they have a huge opportunity and a huge responsibility to help their people find meaning. And so that's one thing. The other thing is to think about meaning and meaningful work, not in these grand, big gestures, but in moments. Meaning happens in moments that matter, right? So one question that I would ask, those leaders to ask themselves is, do you know your team member's spouse's name?
Hmm.
Do you know what activities they do on the weekend? Do you know what sports their kids play? These little moments of connection in the community really add up and make people feel like they belong. For contribution, it's, are you thanking people? Are you highlighting their positive contributions? Are you being specific and strength spotting them? So that's one way to contribution is by positive feedback, positive recognition. Another way is to connect what they do to a bigger impact, something outside themselves. So do they know how this spreadsheet that they spent all week working on, how is that going to impact the customer or the team? How does that activate the purpose of the organization? So that's really where, we talk a lot about purpose and start with why, and there's so much research, but just having a purpose isn't enough, right? To kind of build that motivation and that inspiration, we have to understand how we contribute to that purpose. And then for challenge, the question is, do you believe in your people's potential? Do you believe that they can do hard things? Do you give them opportunities to prove you right? Do you support them? And so it's small things. And I always say to leaders who want to start making work more meaningful, start small. Start with a question that you can ask yourself and you can ask your team, you can ask one-on-one or in a meeting. And so for community, the question is, who did I connect with today? Did I connect with someone? If not, there's still time. Go connect with someone, and make that effort. For contribution is, did I do anything today that made a positive difference in the world? Or how did what I do today make a positive difference in the world? And then for challenges, did I learn something new today? Did I help my team learn new things today?
I like that those are so practical and so actionable, and there are ways that we can start to see exactly how the senior most teams or creating this culture. I agree with you 100%. Everyone's watching leaders all the time, for better or for worse. And if we're like, oh, I know my purpose, I just don't talk about it all the time. Well,
Right.
talk about it.
Yes.
Let people lead by example. It's so important to do that, right?
So important.
And
I just want to double click on this here for a second, because we found that this role modeling and walking the talk is so important, Matt, that it is a destroyer of meaning if you don't. If you say one thing and do another, or if you say you want to make work meaningful, but you don't share how, your purpose and you don't connect with people have, humans have BS detectors, right? And the alarms go off, and it's really hard to recover from that. So yes, role modeling is super important.
Well, and you got my attention with your earlier point too about the hyper-local nature of some of this stuff, where managers and team leaders are making some decisions that can really have an effect. So when we think about this type of modeling, let's say that you have a CEO who doesn't do a particularly good job talking about the importance of meaning. They're very financially oriented, very outcomes oriented. That happens sometimes. If you're the team leader, well, you can still do it. You can still talk about meaning, significance. You can ask these questions tomorrow that you're bringing up for us, and still, play that role for your people, because they're looking to you just the same way. So I'm both excited, but also frightened to think about the hyperlocal nature, because we just don't train managers the same way to really understand the gravity of their opportunity and, in my view, their responsibility. But I think that opportunity is there, and that's pretty encouraging.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And I know leaders, and I work with leaders that are exactly what you described. They're not the CEO, right? But they really care, and they want to make sure that their team, that he can kind of create this little bubble, at least within the team, that they're experiencing meaning, they're experiencing growth and community and contribution, even when it doesn't exist in the whole organization. So it is still possible, for sure. And, sometimes it starts slowly spreading. You never know the ripple effects that you might have.
It's true. And I think that you mentioned earlier, when we're experiencing so much, what I would call overwork and burnout and isolation, I think that manager, the team leader, you have a real responsibility or a real opportunity to, to be that bridge, to make that connection. I had a coach on the podcast one time, Chris Phelan. He called it a pocket of sanity. Create a little pocket of
Oh,
sanity inside
exactly.
your
I
organization
love
because
that.
things swirl around you, but you can ask the questions that you shared with us. You can take that active interest, make that human connection. And I really feel like we fail our managers sometimes when we send them to these executive education programs, et cetera. We talk about strategy, operations, tactics. We don't talk about the real human element that's increasingly critical in the modern organization in order to keep people, switched on, engaged, and all those good things.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the leaders that participated in our study is Katie Burke. She was then the CHRO of HubSpot, which is a company, a tech company, software company that again and again and again gets recognized as one of the top places to work, right? They work really hard on their culture, on the employee experience. And she says, we work on our employee experience as hard as we work on our product and our user experience. And so they are a positive outlier in that. And that's exactly the sentiment she described. She said, I wish that in business school we taught these skills to leaders, to managers, but we don't. And so she said, we spend a lot of time. She said these behaviors get picked up, because you learn from the role models that you see. And so these behaviors get picked up and they get passed down. And we spend a lot of time training our managers, training our leaders to unlearn some of these behaviors and learn these more human skills. And the great thing, Matt, is that it's not an either or. What research shows is, so you mentioned the leaders that are like really focused on outcomes, right? On productivity and engagement and innovation and retention. And those are really important for any organization. And what our research clearly shows is that meaningful work is the upstream factor that leads to all of these outcomes. It's the leading indicator of all those lagging indicators. So when leaders focus on making work more meaningful, not only do individuals thrive and they are happier, they bring that well-being home with them. So their families are happier, the communities are happier, but also the organization performs much better. Engagement is up, retention is up, innovation is up, resilience is up. So all those metrics that leaders care about. So it's truly a win-win, which, it's not the favorite term, but I can't think of a better way to express it.
You're speaking my language tomorrow. I absolutely love it. I often refer to that as next level leadership. We spend so much time on the technical bits, but that next level is the people bits. And then the next level above that is when you get into purpose and you get into meaning and significance. And when you find you have a problem with some aspect of the business, it's usually because something's missing at that next level.
Yeah.
So when you start to remove all those blockades and barriers, then that natural energy flows from top to bottom very, very smoothly. But when
Yes.
something is in the way, we get friction, we get people starting to eye the door, we get a little frustration, engagement dips. Now all of a sudden we develop technical problems in the business. You're like, where do you think the energy to fix all these problems is going to come from? You've
Right.
got to unblock that next level, right? So
Exactly. Like we forget that the outcomes we care about come from the people that are
yeah,
doing the work, right?
100%. Yeah. You have such a fascinating background. You've got all the tools in the sense that you've had the academic study, applied positive psychology, you've done the research, but you're also talking about practical tips with, real commercial organizations, like all of it. I love it. And I'm really excited to have you chat just a little bit here about your book, Meaningful Work: How to Ignite Passion and Performance in Every Employee. What can readers expect to find in this anticipated book? I know I'm anticipating it. And at the time it's out, and I can't wait to have people learn more about it. What are they going to find in there?
So the book is a culmination of 5 years of research and application, right? So I started this research when I was a graduate student in the Masters of Applied Positive Psychology program at Penn. And I was really curious to understand the leadership role in creating meaning at work. It's research that hadn't been done before. But I didn't want to just understand it from an academic standpoint because I'm a practitioner. I work with leaders, and so much research kind of dies in the journals. And it's important to me that that this research gets applied and tried and tested and making sure that it works. And so And so I started this research 5 years ago. I've been working with organizations and leaders to apply it. And so what you can find in the book is a combination of evidence-based practices and tools that are simple and small, like in these creating these moments that matter, and really inspiring stories of leaders that are doing this really well that you can kind of use as a role model, to inspire you to do meaning in your own kind of way.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I think everything we talked about with it being more local than ever, the team manager, whether you're trying to build a culture, check out the book, find the tips, the practical tips, research-backed tips. This is exactly, I think, what we need here in the world of work. So I'm so glad you took the time to pull that together. I know how much of a marathon that can be.
Yeah, it's definitely filled the C bucket, the challenge C bucket in the in the meaningful work. It was a meaningful process, but challenging for sure.
So true. Well, I tell you, what I find meaningful sometimes having a little bit of fun. So what I thought we would do is have a little trivia question here. I've created this game called Are We Smarter Than AI? We're going to have AI ask us a trivia question.
Okay.
And you and I are a team, so I have no idea what's about to happen, which is
Okay.
always exciting. And I was trying to think of a good trivia sort of theme, if you will, related to meaning, and it was harder than I thought it was going to be. So what I've ended up with is we have a trivia question here about dictionaries.
Okay.
Why not? Why not?
Why
So
not?
here's our question. Which of the following is not a commonly used dictionary in the English language? Merriam-Webster, Oxford English Dictionary, Cambridge Dictionary, or the Scrabble Dictionary? Oh, geez.
Ooh, in the English
Language.
language. I mean, the Merriam-Webster, I feel like, is definitely in the
Definitely in there.
Oxford. So what are the other two? The
Cambridge,
Scrabble?
Cambridge Dictionary and the Scrabble Dictionary.
Oh my gosh, I think it's between those two.
But let's just say Cambridge Dictionary.
Cambridge, yeah.
Listeners, if you're playing along at home, you can lock in your own answer. We're going to say Cambridge Dictionary just for fun. We're going to see what happens. And yeah, okay. Well, it didn't work, so we're
Oh
just going to say we
no.
were right. How's that?
Yes, I like that.
Thanks a lot, AI. You let us down, but that's okay. But I'll ask you an even better question tomorrow, which is this: where can my listeners go to learn more about you and about your wonderful book?
Great. Well, I can be found on LinkedIn. I post there all the time, the latest research, some stories. So my LinkedIn, my Instagram are pretty updated. And so those are great places. And then to find more about the book and the services and everything that I offer, you can go to makeworkmeaningful.com.
Love it, love it. Listeners, I'm going to have those links for you in the show notes. You're only one click away from getting over to connect with Tamara, learn all about her book. Tamara, thank you so much for spending some time and sharing your insights with my audience today. Really love it having you on.
Thank you so much. This was a pleasure.